Welcome to Team L's presentation on communications and conflict resolution. Conflict may have a negative impact on team performance, especially in virtual teams. By working on this project virtually, we have experienced first-hand communication and conflict issues, so we decided to focus our presentation on interpersonal conflict management strategies with special reference to virtual teams. Communication refers to the process by which information is transmitted and understood between two people or a group, while conflict is a process that occurs when one party perceives that another party has negatively affected or is about to negatively affect something that they care about. On average, each employee, as well as HR, spends about 1 to 5 hours every week dealing with conflict in some way. Witt, Greer, and Jen's conflict literature has identified 3 types of group conflict. Relationship conflicts are disagreements among group members about interpersonal issues, such as personality differences or differences in norms and values. Task conflicts are disagreements among group members about the content and outcomes of the task being performed. Process conflicts are disagreements among group members about the logistics of task accomplishment, such as the delegation of tasks and responsibilities. Virtual teams are geographically dispersed work teams in which members rarely, if ever, meet physically and may even reside in different time zones and countries. Globalization and the explosion of advanced communication technologies have fueled an increased presence of virtual teams in organizations. 46% of companies use virtual teams in their workplace, and 80% of companies surveyed believe this number will continue to grow. In this presentation, we will address 2 theories: the Deutsch's cooperation and competition theory and the dual concern theory. Deutsch's cooperation and competition theory predicts types of interactions that will occur between negotiating parties based on disputing styles, which refers to the type of interdependence among goals of the people involved in a given situation. Positive interdependence occurs when parties have a win-win orientation and yields a cooperative relationship. Negative interdependence occurs when parties have a win-lose situation and tends to yield competitive relationships. Positive interdependence between parties will facilitate constructive resolution of a conflict as opposed to a competitive process. The dual concern model was proposed by Prout and Rubin in 1986. The model predicts conflict behavior based on the balancing of concerns of meeting one's own goals and concern for other people and maintaining healthy relationships. There are 4 main interpersonal group conflict management styles. Collaboration integration results in a win-win orientation by having a high concern for both self and others. Competition involves having high concern for the self and low concern for others, which results in a win-lose orientation. Avoidance results in a lose-lose orientation in which there is a low concern for both the self and others, and conflict is suppressed. Compromise involves a moderate level of concern for self and others, where parties match the other's party concessions and actively search for a middle ground. Accommodation results in a win-lose orientation in which there is low concern for the self and high concern for others. Both theories see social motives as the key to problem-solving behaviors and outcomes, and also predict that pro-social rather than egoistic motives are more likely to develop positive attitudes and mutual understandings. The dual model theory has a 2-dimensional approach and is more refined and useful in making predictions about problem-solving behavior and outcomes compared to the unidimensional structure of Deutsch's theory. Empirical evidence for Deutsch's theory is mainly provided by research, social dilemmas, and related experimental games. The dual model, however, has received good empirical support in both field and experimental research. The dual concern model has also been extensively used as a basis for developing instruments to assess conflict management strategies at work model. Hence, we chose to focus on the dual concern model. For traditional teams, studies have consistently shown that, as predicted by the dual concern theory, collaborative conflict management style positively affects team outcomes in a variety of research and task contexts. But besides being physically dispersed, virtual teams are often temporally dispersed as well. In a study conducted by Montoya, Weiss, Macy, and Song in 2001, used an experimental design to look at the effects of the conflict management behaviors predicted by the dual concern theory and the temporal coordination on performance in virtual teams. The study consisted of 175 participants organized into 35 teams to work on a project. The independent variable is presence versus absence of temporal coordination. Another independent variable is conflict management behaviors, which were individual questionnaires on perception of conflict management behaviors. The dependent variable was virtual team performance. The study found that collaboration and competition conflict management behavior was positively related to team performance, which is the same for traditional teams. This effect was not moderated by the presence of temporal coordination mechanism. According with the authors, this finding suggests that the lean, asynchronous communication environment may have mitigated the negative connotations of competition behavior. Accommodation conflict management behavior had no significant effect on team performance as opposed to traditional teams. This may be a beneficial artifact of the computer-mediated communication environment. Avoidance and compromise conflict management behavior had a significantly negative effect on team performance, but temporal coordination mechanisms significantly weakened this effect. This result was expected. In conclusion, the dual concern theory management styles that is applicable to synchronous groups may not be wholly transferable to an asynchronous group owing to the fundamental differences in the communication environments. Team L, our team for this course, is the subject of our case study. Our first virtual meeting as a culturally diverse team inspired us to explore the concept of communication and conflict resolution in the context of virtual teams. We decided to carry out the first part of our assignment with only virtual meetings as an experiment to our case study to enable us to understand the limitations affecting virtual communication and its potential conflicts. Our virtual communication medium was written messages on Facebook Messenger and groups as well as verbal, no video meetings through Skype. While conflict is already prevalent in teams, the absence of face-to-face interaction for virtual teams such as ours, while working on the group charter, further reduced effectiveness of communication. Poor intragroup transmission of information leads to high potential for conflict between virtual group members. The conflicts we had were a mixture of task, relationship, and process. Task. Due to different course backgrounds, the vision that each team member had for this assignment conflicted. For instance, Iwana, from a psychology background, is oriented towards an evaluative approach on theories, while Philip, who is from a computer science background, is accustomed to empirically proven theoretical results. Different individual values on work styles caused conflict. For instance, Sabrina, who was brought up in Malaysia, avoids voicing out disagreements directly, while Yvette, who grew up in Australia, prefers to share her opinions directly. Relationship conflict, as found by Burley, Stark, and Kessler in 2009, proved to be more determinantal to virtual teams than face-to-face teams because it was difficult to sort out individual differences virtually. Process. For the group charter, there were disagreements on the delegation of tasks and responsibilities as messages posted on our chat were not always read and understood by team members, leading to conflict based on given tasks. This conflict was aggravated with the lack of face-to-face meeting, which limited chances at working together. Initially, there were different management styles between each team member due to background and personality differences. Iwana, who had a background in psychology, felt like she knew the most about the topics and had less concern for the opinion of others, while Philip and Edward were willing to compromise since they were not studying in this field. Sabrina put aside her views with the concern that disagreements would upset team members, and Yvette took a collaborative approach by putting forward her views and facilitating discussions. These different approaches were not coherent and led to ineffective conflict management, especially since the lack of face-to-face contact hinders empathy. Nonetheless, due to the sharing of the major goal of producing a good group charter presentation, we pushed aside individual differences and ended up having a high concern for both self and others, which leads to a collaborative approach aimed at problem solving. We placed emphasis on being open to everyone's points of view and tried our best to objectively consider of all the information, bearing in mind that integration of these diverse ideas could be a strength for our team. When a conflict occurs, we share efforts to solve it by reaching a jointly optimal solution agreed upon democratically. With the understanding that we are graded as a group rather than individually, the goal to achieve good grades are correlated among team members. This positive interdependence was eventually more evident than individual differences, and we ended up adopting a win-win orientation aimed at constructive resolution of conflict through cooperation. The result was higher openness towards dissimilarities and greater sense of mutuality that facilitated better communication and coordination. In summary, conflict is costly and very detrimental to an organization. We spoke about 3 types of conflicts: task, relationship, and process. We also noted that aspects of conflict within a virtual team is different from those of a traditional team. Recommendations: orientate towards problem solving. Be open and objective towards differences. Focus on a common goal and objective of the team as a whole. Thank you.